Before, after, before, after.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Ryan.
No, that was an excited hi, Tim.
Oh,
like, hi.
Hi, Ryan.
That wasn't a hi, Tim. I don't like being here. That was a, I guess, not flirty, but like, hey, Tim. We're back at it, and I'm excited.
Ooh. Oh, well, hello.
We're back at it.
You know,
Where are we
I've
at
been
it?
working on my Jeff Goldblum.
And?
Yeah. I figured out that if I just go, yes, well, hello, I can start to get in the range. It's a work in progress, though. Ryan,
Exactly. And where are we? What is this? This is episode 121 of Dismembering Horror, the podcast show, where myself, Ryan McDuffie, and
myself, Jeff Goldblum, Tim Aslan.
God damn it. Yeah, Tim. Me, Ryan, and Tim here. We talk about what worked, what did not work, and anything else we found interesting or noteworthy about a horror film. We're on a quest for the sight unseen. We love exploring the unexplored. We love cataloging and learning for ourselves by dismembering these horror films, all that there is to offer, by plunging into the darkness, so to speak. Indeed. We're on, and you know what an appropriate way to put it for today's episode, Tim? We're always on the hunt for gold, silver, you know, like we're prospectors in Western time.
Hey.
Because we watched a Western.
Mm-hmm. I got it.
That's right. We watched from 2015, Bone Tomahawk, with our bud, Kurt Russell, our bigger bud, Patrick Wilson.
Your favorite.
Matthew Fox from Lost, Richard Jenkins, whole motley crew. David Arquette, hey, we just finished watching him as Dewey this last October for the Scream movies. Anything else you'd like to add before jumping into our trailer here?
Pretty wild cast.
Yeah.
I mean, like, a lot of really famous people are in this movie. And this movie is like a pretty small, you know, the budget was $2 million, not even.
Yeah, it was interesting. I totally saw this as the kind of movie where it's just like solid script. You get the actor on board, you can raise X amount of money. Yeah. Then with that actor, you get that other actor and can raise X amount more money. And then, I mean, you know, to get ahead of ourselves here, I mean, the acting is like what makes this work entirely, I think. The casting, the acting. So
yeah,
it's good.
It seems like, you know, it's crazy. Directorial debut of the Craig Zahler. I don't know anything about this guy, but
no, he did. Maybe it was directorial debut. Yeah, he had written something before this.
Mm-hmm. But you know, he got Kurt Russell, and I originally was going to be Jeff. Whatever. This doesn't matter. But I think that's it. It's like you get Kurt Russell, and you're off to the races, baby.
Yeah, he's a cinematographer, so I'm guessing, you know, that got him in good.
Yeah.
We needed to get
Probably
in good
worked with Mr. Russell at some point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh wait, 2 years. Oh no, that's I don't know. Anyways,
is right. What'd you think?
Well,
did you love it?
How about we watch the trailer, then I'll tell you.
Sounds good.
All right, here we go from 2015, the trailer for Bone Tomahawk.
There's a situation. Serious.
Mrs. O'Dwyer was abducted.
She is my everything, and those savages have got her. God knows what they're doing to her, and every second that we delay.
You know who did this? They don't have a name. How many of them do you think there are?
It won't matter. You have no chance against any number of them.
I'm coming with you.
No, I need you here.
And this is what the backup's for, to help an emergency, not stay back. I'm coming.
We're making a 5-day journey in 3 days, riding along and sleeping the bare minimum.
I don't know what's west of here. No cattle trail or anything else goes in that direction.
If our horses die before we get there, or we go into hostile territory, weak and foggy with exhaustion, we won't rescue anybody.
Don't be scared. I am a friend.
You aren't.
Damn you!
You had no cause. If you want to question my morals, do it later.
Well, Tim, to try to answer your question, did I love Bone Tomahawk? I have to look at it from the perspective of this kind of seemed like the best movie ever coming right after the Banana Splits movie. You know,
Sure.
a mere solid film felt just like the best thing ever. But honestly, it's not that. I'm like kind of going between to jump into our rating system here, like a very high stream it or a lower tier rent it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so much that was great and going for it, but something was keeping it back from totally elevating it for me.
Yep.
But it was still all there. I don't know, man. It's hard. Like coming right off of again, fucking Banana Splits movie. This is so bad. Like I want to give this a rent, which I didn't have to do, and I did have to rent the Banana Splits movie. But I don't know. In my heart and soul, I feel like this is exactly what a really good stream movie should be.
Yeah.
And it's why I'm catching myself too, is because like I think I gave like 2,000 to Maniacs, like a rent it, right? Which, in its writing, plotting, yada yada, it may not necessarily in all these elements be a quote unquote better film, but I just think it was cooler and it stuck with me in a way, and it had a vision behind it and such character behind it. This one did have character, but it was more just like, cool. Not like, whoa, this indelible movie. Great moments. I don't know. Okay, it sounds like I'm saying very high stream it, even though I don't want to like group it with other stream it's. Hey, that's just the fault of our rating system, but I'll go ahead and give it that.
I agree. I'm a high stream. I liked it less than I remembered. And
Right.
I think partially because now I was watching it with a more critical eye. The first time I watched it, I kind of just was like, oh, I heard this was fun, and casually watched it. And so all I had remembered from casually watching it was basically the last 30 minutes. And I realized why that was, is because the first hour and a half of this movie are pretty fucking dull. So, it's got some good stuff in it, but it just doesn't quite get there, and we can discuss why.
Yeah. Those sound like fighting words. I don't know if I'd put it quite that. It was weird. I was going back and forth on like what you might call dull. It was actually kind of refreshing and just getting to hang out with these characters who I legitimately did not want to die. But whatever. I mean, I looked at the running time and was like, yeah, but did it need to be that? Probably not.
I think it could be this movie could have been a half hour shorter.
Yeah.
I think.
Great. Well, what's next, Tim? We've both given it a high stream it. Next, we gotta summarize it. What did we make of this film? How do you explain this film to someone as far as the content?
Well, let's see. It is the 1890s, and I think we're in Wyoming or something like that, or we're supposed to be. I don't remember if it's specific at any point. But there's a couple of, what do you call them? They're like traveling thieves, murderers, thieves, and they like jump on people's camps in the middle of them sleeping and kill them and take their stuff, right? So they suck. And in doing so, they disrupt a indigenous burial site in some valley in these mountains. And that sets off a chain of events, which starts with the indigenous tribe that has been living in the mountains tracking down one of the dudes or the surviving dude who disrupted their burial site. And that's our friend, what's his name? What is his name? David Arquette.
Oh, he is Purvis, though he lies and says his name is Buddy, which was actually his buddy's name,
Right, exactly.
Sid Haig, who is killed.
And so that's our catalyst, right? Like him going into this town brings the indigenous tribe with him, essentially, and then through the sort of just circumstance, they kidnap one of the townspeople's wives, who is sort of the town doctor, a deputy, and Purvis, David Arquette, because they were the three in the jail overnight. So really, they were there to take Purvis, but they snagged a couple extras, as you do. And because of all of this, then we get our actual story, which is Sheriff Kurt Russell, Franklin Hunt, his older deputy, Chicory, who's played by Richard Jenkins, Patrick Wilson, who's the husband, the injured husband of the doctor, Samantha, who's played by Lily Simmons, and Matthew Fox, who plays kind of like a well-to-do gunslinger guy. And he comes along because he feels responsible because he's the one who went and got the doctor. He fetched the doctor and brought her to the jail cell. So he feels some sense of responsibility. So that's our team of 4.
Our little posse.
Yeah. So mini posse. Everybody feels like they have an obligation to do this, even though they've been explicitly told by the resident expert on indigenous tribes in the area that this particular tribe is way bad. And this is a suicide mission because they're not even evolved humans. They're troglodytes.
Right. It's great. We have this great setup where our, English-speaking Native American, he's the in-between friend of all our white people. He's basically like, oh no, I can point to you on a map where they are, but I don't want to die, so I'm not going.
Yeah.
And he says they're troglodytes, and these are not my people. He's very specific. Yeah.
And just so we're all on the same page, troglodyte has a specific meaning. Here's the definition. A cave dweller, a human being who inhabits a cave or the area beneath the overhanging rocks of a cliff. So, whatever.
So it's accurate. It's very accurate to what they are.
They were a prehistoric human.
Yeah.
There
Yes.
you go.
Anyway,
so that's fun.
Evolved in caves, kind of like they're somewhere between people and the descent creatures.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I kept thinking of too. Anyway, so that's it, right? That's your setup, and then the story really is we follow these guys out on the range, trying to get to the valley that these troglodytes inhabit it's called the Valley of the Starving Men. And we spend about an hour and a half out there dilly-dallying.
But Tim, the the real meat and bones of this all is that these troglodytes are cannibals. That's what puts us into horror territory.
True that.
They are brutal, brutal cannibals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and eventually we get to them, and they do some brutal, brutal cannibal stuff.
Yeah, great.
And that's really it. Like, you know, as you can imagine, some people die and a couple people survive in the end.
Boom, bada, bam.
Yep.
So within all that, do you want to talk about now what worked for us?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Next section. What worked?
What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
I already kind of set it up top, but I was definitely, hey, key things you want in a horror movie of this kind. I was afraid of their characters dying. You know, I was like, oh, even very little, you know, very little setup. It was just all done so efficiently where like when they're all hanging out and you know stuff's going to go down at the end, I'm like, oh, I'm invested enough where I don't want any of them to die. And of course it's going to happen. Anyway, check, you know?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of like really good framework in this movie.
I put simple story well told. Just the thrust of you just gotta save her. You know?
Like my arguments as to why it's a stream do fall more on sort of like more specific execution of filling out the framework. But yeah, man, I mean, like, Westerns are great partially because of their simplicity. It's like you have a task, you got to go get the thing. You've got people who are, you know, maybe reluctant or feel a sense of duty, and that's what drives them. And that's a really standard and fun construct to live in. And then, you know, I think one of the big benefits of doing a Western is that it's man versus the elements and man versus man, right? Like man versus himself. And that's kind of it, right? It's sort of like you always get these themes of like the honorable thing to do. And, you know, it was a time and a place of really hardship, right? Like you had to be a hardy person to survive in the West, you know, out on the range, and you had to be good at shit, and you had to put up with suffering.
Like here we see everyone's kind of strengths and weaknesses very clearly. Everyone, you know, the fun of seeing a posse balance each other out.
Yeah, and there's that I really like that thing of that sense of duty and honor, and like, you know, we have a responsibility even though we know we're probably going to die.
Yeah.
And there's something compelling about that.
Yeah, it's a clear moral compass. I mean, we live, you know, our world reality. It's just paradoxes are built in anything. It's so easy to be skeptical and question everything. So yeah, a big part of Westerns is this sort of appeal of an almost simplicity of like, not questioning this is the right thing, so we just do it. It's kind of like when we were talking about the purposefulness of the army guys and the thing from another world. And there's a sort of fun, like, on the mission, I don't know, ideal, but just ethos that they embody. And we get that here with posses and Westerns too. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and I think in this movie, the characters are pretty, like, their tropes are pretty well defined. Which is good. I mean, it's. I never felt like anybody was a caricature, which is nice, but they are very much their archetypal, you know, representation.
Yeah, to kind of go down the list and tie that into, you know, I said what worked was the performances / the casting, as you know, they'll go hand in hand.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I'd like to say how they're colored, how they're characterized. Sheriff Hunt is Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell is Sheriff Hunt like the way that is just like a key, just felt like such him moment. And it almost was like a classic Kurt Russell line. I loved it. Was at the way end when we know he's being left to die, but is going to kill the final cannibals. And who they went to save is escaping now, the doctor. And she says, she looks like she just wants to stay with him and is so grateful and wants to give him the world for just doing his job and saving him. So, so she says, thank you, whatever she says, super, you can tell that she wants to do more, but can't, just has to get out of there. And Kurt Russell, Sheriff Hunt, just says, like out of duty, like Mrs. O'Dwyer, just like this perfect Kurt Russell execution, but just said everything about his character too. Or like, he's not like wild or crazy Kurt Russell, but he is really fun for embodying exactly that kind of like what we were already saying, a moral certainty or certitude of and then just sort of fully jumping into that and sort of inspiring us in that sense. Like, it's the Thing, just he's the one who's just always doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's funny. And then
I think that there's this, I don't know that this is actually true, but there's certainly the romanticism of like, that's the way you had to be and how you survived back then, right?
Especially
like,
if you're a sheriff, maybe.
Exactly. He's got this sort of honorable stoicism and bound to duty nature that is just accepting. And he's not gonna protest anything. He's just gonna say, we got to do it. That's the way it is.
So yeah, there's the sheriff, very sheriff-y as we want. And then we have Brooder, played by Matthew Fox, as we know Jack from Lost.
Yeah.
And he's so perfect as the like, wearing the white, off-white, gray. He's the one in that colored suit with that colored hat, just kind of like a, fine mustache he's got going on. But then as he puts it too, after he gets like his hand chopped off and is dying, he, they say, well, we can still save you kind of. And he says, no way, this is my spot. I'm too vain to be a cripple, as he put it.
Yep.
Pardon for using the term. But that just was everything about his character. It's like, yep, that's who he is. He's too vain, and he's saying it. And I love that moment too with him where we see him almost questioning that for a moment when he's left there to die, where like you see almost the survival instinct kicking up against that ego instinct that he just is so tried and fast with. But then in the end, he comes down. Nope, this is my place. I'm too vain. And it was a really nice moment to make out of there, and he was great in it. And then anything on him? I'm just kind of going down the list of people.
No, I think he's good casting. I have a criticism surrounding him, but it's a design criticism. It's not him, his acting or his character at all. So I'll save that for later.
Then learning his name is too perfect, but Richard Jenkins as Chicory, the kind of like, he's kind of like, he's the older one but like the super endearing one who's like maybe a little, he's not like slow or dim-witted, but he's just kind of like maybe overly optimistic, let's say.
He's a bit doddering is what I would call him. You know? Endearing as hell, but doddering. You know, he's getting up in age. He's a widower. Yeah. No, widow, whatever. He's got a profound sense of duty to Sheriff Hunt. And I think he emblemizes this notion of like wanting to feel that you have a purpose once you've entered into the later sort of the autumn of your life.
And someone who just, is all about finding that purpose and sort of helps the team as being almost like the emotional glue or the kind of the heart of the posse. Like, hey, like there are people like this who are just good people that you inherently immediately like. So
he has an amazing line when they've been trekking along for a couple days and he's just chattering and talking about whatever. And somebody, I forget who it is like, don't you ever rest that mouth of yours or something like that. And he says, well, would you rather listen to the sound of tired shuffling feet? And it's like, yeah, no shit. No, you should keep talking. It's such a good, like, it's that counterpoint that he provides to the like the futility of the mission.
Yeah, like no matter what we're doing, we might as well make the best of it and still enjoy each other's company.
Right. There's something really nice about that, you know?
Like, yeah, that doesn't counteract or dampen the stakes or, you know, that spirit he brings to it. And my favorite moment with him, what embodied his caricature for me, his archetype, was when he's, you know, his optimism is at the end when they're in the jail cells and he's like, he's telling the story about seeing, it's very Jurassic Parky. He's talking about seeing a flea parade or like a flea circus.
That's right.
And he's questioning it. He's like, you know, I know it's not supposed to be real, but these things, I swear it was real. Kind of, I knew it in my heart, kind of thing. And then, what's her name?
Samantha.
Samantha, the doctor who they're going to rescue. She says, is like, oh yeah, well, you know, most of them are fake, but I heard that one was real. And he just he just grins so big and is like, I knew it in my heart and soul, that was real. And it's just like, it was just great. Like, yeah, give him that.
Yeah.
That'll keep us all going. And then, yeah, to mention Samantha, I loved her. She was so perfect as like the doctor type. Like when we see her embodying the doctor, very Dr. Quinn medicine woman of like, damn, she's, and not only just the way she was a doctor and carried herself in the room, but also like her speech at the end of saying like, dude, it's not the West and it's all you and all them being idiots. All of you are idiots.
I
kind
love
of like
that speech.
Oh my God, it was so good. It really hit home, or was another example of what we brought up in the thing of another thing from another world that was like all men and 2 women or whatever. But this was like doing that how I'd want, where she called, like what I said in that was, even in a way that, you know, wasn't ever stated, just got me thinking, was like all these men in a group together in charge, so to speak, are just boys with toys running around, just doing stupid things, shooting guns off at each other. And she's just so hip to that and knows that. And it was just so fun to see her be like, yo, dude, all you are just like, come on here. like, like, listen to, like, maybe put us in charge. And we're like, yeah, all these guys. Even, and it was so fun seeing that on the reaction of Sheriff Hunt's Kurt Russell to her calling that out, where like he just seems like someone we could so easily just you know, follow off a cliff if we believed him. But to see him taken down a peg and, you know, in a way that's respectful and, you know, he's not fighting back at all, that was super fun too.
Yeah, I love she has a moment early on when they're in the jail cell and she's treating Purvis, and the younger deputy, she says is that, I think she asked him if the water that she's boiling is hot enough, and he like puts his fingers in it to test it, and she's like, don't put your fingers in there.
Yeah.
like just see if it's warm enough. What the fuck? Is it boiling?
Actually, it did a lot for, sorry to bring it back to him, but it was reinforcing a lot of how Sheriff Hunt is smart because he listens to her. You know, made us respect him more in that sense. And then last but not least, Tim, we have Patrick Wilson as Arthur O'Dwyer.
Your most favorite
So
actor.
Tim says that, however that tone is, because I've kind of ragged on him before. And when we watched Insidious, The Last Key, and all those movies. Here's the thing though, Tim. I liked him in this. I'm so happy to say. And it's because he was playing his type, it felt like. It wasn't... Okay, and this is, okay, much like Jack Bauer in Mirrors, much like the dude in what's that movie that we also referenced? The sheriff in Dead and Buried.
Yeah, Dead and Buried, yeah.
Much like I'll reference the cop in Stranger Things. And since this keeps coming up, I'm just going to say it because this is what I'm always wanting to say. If this means anything to anyone listening at any point in history, maybe it will. I'm super into the Enneagram of personality types. And this, what we always say, this archetype, the real live wire, as I'll put it, the goes in, guns a-blazing, just all force. Send him in there with a gun and let's hope for the best. He'll deal with it as it comes to him. That is the type 8 on the Enneagram, the challenger. And if you can get any kind of similarities between all of them, well, that's who it is. And so I think that's who the best casting is. I think when those, anyone can and should be able to play any type. I get it. But at the same time, when you have someone who like physically embodies this already, like I think Patrick Wilson is the type 8 challenger. And to see him playing that role, it fits, which is, I think, like same with Jack Bauer, same with Kiefer Sutherland, same with the guy playing Hopper. It's fun. Like, it was so much fun seeing him in this role. Like Stu in Scream, I think is the same kind too. Real live wire. This
just makes me think of a fun game to play. We should play this more often. When we have movies that are, characters are so archetypal, we should see who would we be. And I think you're a Chicory.
I didn't relate to Chicory in this one.
Wow. So
I'll push back against
you?
that. I don't think I was in this one.
I don't know. I think you're a Chicory, and I don't know who I am. I'm a Purvis.
No, man, you could say it without putting me. I'm more like God in movies we watch. I'm more like Willard or Norman Bates or like
all right.
these worst sides of me.
What's your Enneagram number?
It's the type 5, which is the observer, but like they're also like there are a lot of like can be either the science weirdos or the artistic weirdos are like the twos. Like you have the Kurt Cobains, Neil Youngs, David Lynch's, Jane Goodall, Kristen Stewart. They're all type 5s. The ones that bring the energy of like, what's the taking everything, being able to synthesize all that has been seen or done before and trying to alchemize something new out of it all. Not being afraid of that first step. And the type 8s, Patrick Wilson in this, are the muscle. They're but in the sense of it can be physical, but more so of like the strength to put the heart in the situation, like the way he is towards his wife, like the same with how Jack Bauer is towards his wife in Mirrors, like
right.
His behavior that we thought was ridiculous was all coming from that place of how much he loved them. I'm sorry to go on this tangent.
I love this stuff.
I love talking about.
You're the one
stuff.
who told me about it.
Yeah, but it's funny. Like in my type, which I didn't see in any of these characters in this. The type 5, like there's called the direction of integration, which is like when you are kind of like what of the other types kind of do you want to embody that will suit you. And so for mine, it's like or like the reluctant leaders of embodying the type 8 kind of just forcefulness. Don't get too caught up in research, try to be with the present, really get out of your head. Like 5s is like one of those like super heady types. Anyway, it's just long-winded to say I do not think I was Chicory.
So what do you think Chicory is on the chart?
I think he is the 2 or maybe the 9. The 2 is the one who does bring like the heart into the situation.
Oh yeah,
of, like,
then he's definitely that.
He's like the Mr. Rogers.
Okay, so what's Sheriff Hunt?
I saw him as the 1 or the 3. It's like, if you don't know this stuff, it's so funny. So you say these 9 numbers. There's 9 total. But those are the very like American ones.
Okay.
1 is the like Gene Siskel is one of my favorite examples of one, where it's like they're the perfectionists in the way, or they're like the ones who, it's funny, they kind of like fall back on like what is normal or what are the rules. But then at the same time are almost like the craziest rule breakers when it comes down to it, if they do think something is BS.
Cool.
Like, but also like, yeah, you know, it is when they do get behind like what is right or wrong, like, and it's true or rings true, like we really feel it and they help carry it. I think Leslie Nielsen might be one, which is why he's like so funny in delivering like something straight-faced. Maybe Kristen Wiig is kind of similar in that sense too. Can be really funny in their comic when they're doing comedy. And then the type 3 is like the Tom Cruise, I think like both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, Oprah Winfrey, Paul McCartney. Okay. They're the one who they're like the star almost. The ones, our friend Mo Marissa Tim is one where like they can be very concerned about what people think of them, how they're coming across. I want it to be me. I want it to be the star. I like this attention. Yet they really excel when they're focused on the goal. So it's Tom Cruise deciding, I'm going to do these stunts for real. And we love watching him do them. You know, he's really fun to watch hanging from a side of a building and running away from a tornado or whatever he's doing. And it's like, yeah, Paul McCartney's the one to hold these like huge concerts with fireworks. And his songs are the kind of poppiest and like appealing and singable of them all.
So let's just round it out. What would then... Matthew, what's his name?
Oh yeah, actually, you know what? I see Sheriff Hunt is the 3, and Matt, Brooder, the 2 vain one. Even though the vanity is the more type 3 thing, I see him as how he carries himself, or maybe the actor is more type 1. Just this kind of like haunted by.
So a good
what's
foil
right and wrong.
For the sheriff.
Yeah.
And it works because they even get to that point, right, where they have the standoff between the two of them. It's like they're on the same side, but they have a different attitude as to how to accomplish the goal. And they are very much kind of almost like mirrors of each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. I like that scene a lot. Bruder setting up the camp tripwire that has bells on it, and then when somebody shows up, the first time it's a coyote probably, and he just, the second he hears the bell, he just sits right up and shoots without even asking questions, just right off the bat. And that leads us to the next time when the couple of other dudes show up, and there's this semi-standoff, one really beautiful tableau wide shot of the intruders and the camp being like wide framed on each side of the frame, like this sort of panoramic shot. It's really beautiful. And Brooder ends up just shooting the guy. Both of them.
Yeah.
And Kurt Russell is like, yo, why'd you do that? And they immediately turn their guns on each other. And there's this really tense, great standoff moment of like, what are you going to do? And then like, I just think it kind of speaks to the whole movie in a way. It's like, what are we doing?
Right.
Like, what are we doing?
Actually, yeah, you reminded me of those examples. Brooder that is all very type 1 of the certitude of these guys are bad guys, even if I don't actually know it. You know? That's and so to tie it all back, Patrick Wilson, the real live wire, the type 8 challenger. It's so much fun to watch that archetype just like And they built the suspense so well where like they all get trapped and he's hanging behind because of his injury, which is a great device too overall.
Yeah.
Is just him. He's always catching up and we don't know if he's going to live or be, whatever is going to happen with him with his injury. But just so much fun, that anticipation of like, just send that guy in there with a gun and it's going to be fun seeing him deal with it as it comes to him.
Yeah. Well, in a way, what I like about the construct of his character, because ultimately it's more his story than anybody else's. And it's really to the point of his wife's speech about that they're all just a bunch of idiots. And the story ultimately is a commentary on men just, being stubborn idiots, and Patrick Wilson embodying that and having to go through some pretty harsh trials and like, what's the term? Shit. You hear it in, they say it in sports, all the attrition, right? He has to go through this attrition to make it make his stupidity matter, right? Like he has to suffer pretty badly to make up for just being a dumbass all the time and like disconnected from his own emotions and all of these sort of like traditional, I think falsely, but male ideals of like, don't have emotions, don't show love, don't like, listen to other people. Like he has to go through this thing to sort of actually show his worth and prove to himself that there's something more important than just his own dumb stubbornness.
You're talking about Patrick Wilson as Arthur O'Dwyer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, that's all was embodied so well with his reticence and embarrassment to read the letter that sort of, that his wife said, called a poem. And he's like, well, I don't want to read it out loud.
Yeah.
Which that's an example very like, that is very type 8 of like, it's their journey can be a lot to do with that misappropriation of force with strength. And you think it takes strength to actually for him to overcome that embarrassment and read something from the heart.
Yep.
But it's when those challenger types are able to come from that place where they just embody a place where they'll be reaching us versus being that kind of overly tough love maybe approach they can take.
Yeah. So
anyway,
for me, the other components of the movie that I think really work are the bad guys, the monsters, the design of them, the gratuity of them, and there's the brutality of it.
Well, I mean, you gotta, I feel like, put that in the context of all, like from the get-go, when you just hear the premise of this movie, you feel like, oh God, this could be going to tricky territory.
I worried when it started. I was like, ooh. In today's
the Native
context,
Americans
I was
are
like,
the
I'm
bad
not
guys.
sure I'm going to be into this.
Well, this is recent enough. I think we are not people to speak to this, but as far as, hey, whatever we are thinking at this time, hey, I mean, it felt to me like, yeah, they're troglodytes, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Native American character who very clearly says, this is not us at all.
Right.
These are something completely different.
And that you white people probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference because you're stupid.
Yeah.
He specifically says that. He's like, I know you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but that's because you're dumb.
But even then, I feel like you gotta do more, which they did, which was so great. You have it so they are literally evolved differently.
Yep.
They have these things in their throats that like are like in the Jurassic Park 3, the little velociraptor vocal things. So you have these like weird bone pipes that have like evolved in their throats that explains their monstrous yell. And then, I mean, if that's not enough, what really did it too is like, how could you defend these people when we see finally what they're doing to their women? They it's like serious Green Inferno stuff. It's horrifying. They like have it down so it's just the two women who are both pregnant. All their limbs are gone because they've eaten them, and they're blinded by having pegs in their eyes. So it's like they've literally just turned them into birthing meat lumps.
Yep.
So it's pretty hard to feel like these aren't bad guys in some regard when that's what they're doing.
But here's the thing. This is why this is good storytelling. And when you put it up against what we were talking about and sort of feeling like we were lacking in the Banana Splits movie.
Yeah.
Remember, we were like, there's no real connection, right? There's no sort of layering of like importance and thematic reflection between the antagonist and the protagonist. In this movie, it is precisely that, specifically that. What this movie is showing is misplaced masculinity in the sort of context of the caveman, right? Like just brute force caveman embodiment is the bad guy. That's the external bad guy. It's personified. The internal bad guy is that toxic sort of misplaced masculinity in these men, and how those two things are put up against each other, and how the more evolved man has to get in touch with essentially his feminine side, his empathy and compassion and sense of responsibility to carry out a task for the good of other people. And those two things put up against each other, that's fucking good storytelling and good character, because you actually have the context of those two things, the framework of those things, which are basically the same thing. It's the same bowl, the context that you're putting the content into. And they work off of each other. You didn't get that in the Banana Splits movie, and that's what was kind of a bummer, right? Because you could have. Yeah. But this is I think a very good example of a screenwriter knowing how to like frame a story and the themes of that story really well and very simply from the get-go, and then build off of that, rather than what I think a lot of other movies do is they come up with a high concept idea and then they try to sort of shoehorn in themes. This is doing it the other way, and I think often this is the more effective way to do it. You can build off of it.
That's starting with what?
Starting with a very simple context of masculinity or of brute force and forming the content that goes into that bowl from that point.
Right, so it doesn't have to be like literally from the start, but just saying, knowing early enough that this is all about this kind of fighting each other, killing each other's allowed masculinity, and then sort of attaching that to, crazed cannibals, violence, great. I'll pit each other against each other. And then maybe like what you're saying too, or I just thought of a fun way to put it, this versus the Banana Splits movie has characters revealing other characters' character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I just a little thought I had on Patrick Wilson still and him saving the day at the end. Didn't quite get to was I thought it was so great, so nice. It's funny kind of putting what worked for me as something that they didn't do. But I was so happy that it wasn't like they had the best of both worlds, where it wasn't like he just showed up magically at the end to save the day, which is kind of what I thought. Like once we get with Kurt Russell and the other guy and her, who are all, I thought we were just going to be with them and then he was going to pop up and save the day. But it was so smart to cut back to Arthur O'Dwyer, Patrick Wilson, and sort of be with him for getting up and making that final stretch and killing a few more of the troglodytes, and then we still had that fun of him showing up at the cave, but it wasn't like it had to be a total like save the day at the end thing. And it was really nice too, that little touch where even though he's the one saving the day, they were able to give Samantha and the sheriff and the other guy, Chicory, something all to do with trying to poison them with what the poison that they had. So it wasn't like they were just sitting there waiting to be saved or die. They were still trying with what they have.
Right.
Well, Tim, we got to mention it's a horror film. How about some of the I mean, there's a standout horror moment, I feel like. It's as far as
avoiding talking about it.
I mean, hey, we're just getting to it as we do. But oh man, I mean, that's just sitting down to watch this like as a horror movie. It fully delivered just with that single moment alone towards the end of. Well, I'll describe it for you listeners if you weren't able to watch it with us either way.
Well, just to set it up, one thing. We spend about an hour and a half of this movie anticipating the horror of these troglodytes. We've been told that they're bad dudes and that they're inhuman in a way. And we've been waiting to find out sort of what that's all about.
Yep.
And then...
So it's the other deputy from the beginning that was captured with the doctor, Samantha, where he's taken in front of them to be cannibalized. And the process for that, so they scalp him live in front of us, take his scalp and shove it into his mouth, then turn him upside down, and with their bone tomahawk that they use, these jaws of bears or whatever that they use, that are sharpened, slice down into him from the rear end, splitting him apart. Like he's, they stand him up on his head and split him down the middle from his rear with their bone tomahawk. And then pull him apart.
Right in the crotch.
Yep. Whew. But Tim, watching that here, it was what I wanted from a horror movie. I was going like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Which is so funny when it's like, I realized again, just coming off of the Banana Splits movie, if the gore was the highlight for that, I was still just kind of like, when watching Banana Splits movie, just kind of like, oh, when the gore moments happen. But here, when it was actually invested in it and they built to it and it was a competently done movie, just like the night and day difference of the visceral reaction, that even something that you could argue is just about the visceral reaction hit me that much more.
Well, I have a thought. To further this emphasis on the themes of this movie and how it's contextualized, killing the young, theoretically, strong, he's a young virile dude, right? He should, in a lot of contexts, a lot of ways, be the sort of the strongest and the most heroic if you're going from the classic male, story construct. And to take that character and not only flay him from his literal manhood,
flay him,
but to bisect him in such a unemotional way, the way that you would butcher cattle when you're getting ready for a barbecue, is to turn him into an animal, essentially, the way that we humans often view our food. We take animals and we butcher them. And to do that to the character that sort of represents youth and virility and masculinity speaks even further to this theme of where we misplace the ideals of masculinity. And these cavemen are representative of the worst version of that. And so it's not just for the gore or for the sake of the shock. It has built-in thematic meaning to do it that particular way. And I think it's, again, a testament to good storytelling to think about those things. And maybe it wasn't thought out, but I think the instinct at the very least was there, and it ties into the broader storytelling themes that are in this movie. It's fucking good. It's smart.
Agreed. And on top of that, I mean, that's kind of like the standout horror moment, but it's not alone in sort of, they push the violence in other areas in a way that's working on multiple levels of just either if it's like the cringe moment of when he's shoving another like bone knife thing down Kurt Russell's throat before hitting him. And then what they just did so well, that's like, yeah, it's important to do to kind of let us live in the reality a bit more and sort of, or set a good reality and good for the stakes, is they really get beat up along the way. Like when they get ambushed or whatever right before they're captured, or that leads to their capture, like both the sheriff and Chicory like get, arrows in them in different places, and you're just getting that throughout. So it's like no one's safe, which is so important for this kind of movie.
Yeah, and the brutality of it. I mean, when Kurt Russell toward the end is his stomach is sliced open, and they jam the flask, the burning or the heated up flask into him.
That was so good. That was so good.
I know. I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
And he just barrels forward because he knows he's screwed. But he's got a duty.
He's the sheriff.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I would have mentioned that, the shoving the flask into the open wound. And it was just great as far as like establishing too, these troglodytes are still smart enough. I mean, they're still human enough where like they have an understanding of cruelty. It's not there. It was just such a nice touch. And I'm glad they showed that these people, these troglodytes, would specifically enjoy getting revenge after someone getting poisoned by taking the thing. And God, when they did that first cut into his stomach too,
that really,
because it was just like there was still the part of me that was like, maybe he's still going to be okay, maybe they're going to save him. But when you see that cut happen, you're like, that's looking pretty bad.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this movie. The length of the setup to get to that moment, overall is effective. Now, I think I maybe would want it to be a little bit shortened leading up to that. But man, when you get there, the payoff is so good and so strong. And like, I think that's why I had so completely forgotten the first 2/3 of the movie from the first time I watched it, because the last third is just so like, oh man.
Yeah.
So, good job.
Great. I think that's the last little thing I had that was just sort of like to keep comparing it to the last film we watched that we just very much did not like, was an avoid. We both would have told ourselves to avoid the Banana Splits movie. The last shot of this film says a lot of just they were aware of these things and thinking of these terms of, it's missing something. Well, what is the theme that's going on here? What's something that would sort of play off? What's something that would happen in this context that we've now set up? A new opportunity to pull that feels right. So towards the ending, when they're walking out, or at the way ending, when they're finally leaving, and Sheriff Hunt's left there to kill the last ones and die, and Chicory, we see Chicory, Samantha, Patrick Wilson, just interchanging all their names now at this point, but they're leaving, and Chicory on his way out picks up like a solid, he doesn't have a gun anymore. He picks up a solid looking rock, stone, where we immediately get, oh, this is, have some kind of weapon handy because these are guys that will just run at you with their bone machete, bone tomahawk. Sorry. And then after they get the gunshots, which mean where they hear the gunshots off in the distance, was presumably the sheriff killing the last ones. He has faith. He puts down the rock. He doesn't need it anymore. And that is the last shot, the rock sitting there.
Yeah.
And it's like just how much better. It just gives you a little something to chew on versus they just walk off into the sunset together. It's like, it's hard to describe. It's like, yeah, I'm feeling something there. I'm thinking about something there. It feels just so,
Well, and yeah, I think that there's sort of a universality and like almost instinctual realization in that like one of the most primitive things you can do is grab a rock, and use that rock in any number of ways, right? As a tool or as a weapon or whatever. But it really does sort of represent the evolution of the humans in this story moving on from their primitive natures, right? He's literally letting go of the rock, of the stone, right? Like it's almost like we've left the Stone Age and now we're into the next age, whatever, right? There's a really, it's just, it makes inherent sense to us without really having to pick it apart. It's just so I don't know what the word is.
It's true cinematic storytelling. It's not. Yeah, it comes
just
from
get
a visual.
It. You don't need to think about it. You just get it.
It's action and visual. And why I say true cinematic storytelling is you shouldn't. I'm a big proponent of you shouldn't even though I love theme and it's important to come from that place. I like theme stated, but it should be something that theme for me is something that should be explored. You can have positions on it, but I don't like a finality to it. I don't think anything in life, you can sort of say, I mean, you can, there's movies where it's like, yeah, we like this straight up. This is clearly wrong moral. But even those, you get at a deeper something of sort of exploring quote unquote sides to it. Anyway, that's just a little more thoughts on, yes, why can feel but it's not that it's a good thing if it's not just like, oh yeah, it's not pat. Yeah. Those are the good ones.
Yeah.
God, that Graduate ending is always the perfect example.
Yep.
Great. Well, Tim, it sounded like we, lo and behold, did have some stuff that didn't work for us if we both gave it stream.
Yeah.
Though a high stream, again, nearly a low rent. Should we get into that?
I think we should.
All right, here we go. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
For me, Tim, I can sum it up and then expound on, of course. What did not work? There was these something I'll just immediately take me out of a film, and they did. I know it may sound you're just being so picky, Ryan, but the Foley sounds, the can sounds that they had for doors closing and opening.
Wow, that's a cool one.
But it's so much because it says that it's still at the level of filmmaking or directing where there's still some kind of quote unquote indie trappings to it.
Yeah.
And that was largely with how it was shot for me. I'm like, when watching it, I was like, this story, it's cool. It's great. I love the acting, but what's missing here? And why is it different from, let's say, just thinking of any other, great movie, maybe just pick other Westerns for this example,
Tombstone.
Tombstone, Good, the Bad, the Ugly is one of my favorite movies. I loved Kelly Reichardt's Western. What is that called? That was really good. But they're all something that there's just like the sort of meaning in itself of that last shot. There's something in, there should always be something in every shot that's doing something and how it's there. This just felt like they were going for make it nice. It didn't involve. I never felt involved on a filmmaking level, or like sucked in a way that just sort of caught me off guard, like the best of movies, and I have to pick it apart later. It's just kind of like, it just kind of feels safe and pretty and okay.
I felt very similarly. There's only maybe 2 or 3 shots in the whole film that made me go, oh, that's a cool shot. Everything else felt very... I was trying to figure out, like, I feel like the whole thing is shot on, like a 50, you know? I mean, a 50 millimeter lens. We're all, like, pretty close to everybody. There's a lot of 2 shots, like, just, like, chest and up. There's not a lot of cutting to a wide. There's not a ton of establishing sort of the geometry of a scene and then like working with that and like making it say something.
It kind of felt like all their spots where they stopped for a fire were like literally the same location.
Exactly. Yeah. I kept having this thought, like this was shot in the Malibu sort of canyons or, you know, Santa Monica Mountains. And it really did feel like almost in that way that Planet of the Vampires did, where they're just like turning the camera around for each scene and just shooting within a 360-degree set.
It's all the same mountain. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just going from this, in this scene, we're going, you know, left to right along this ridge or whatever. And then in 4 scenes later, we're just going right to left and shooting it from a slightly different angle. You know what I mean? It felt like that.
It was all, they're going right from left alongside the base of the mountain is what the whole movie felt like. And maybe that sounds nitpicky, but it's like...
It has an effect.
It can be... Here's the thing. It's like that... You can do that, and that's fine. But there was no kind of like progression or like individual characters towards the scenes themselves. Like, I don't know how to describe it.
I do. So when you're doing a journey story, the environment often, like one of the best tools you have is to have environment represent the progression of the story. So let's take a really stark example. In Mad Max Fury Road, you go from one environment to the next, to the next, to the next, and they're quite different from each other, and they represent the moment that they're occurring in, right? So like when they're in the canyons, that's a really intense, very specific vibe. The walls are literally, you know, closing in on them in that moment. You have all of the bad guys coming in at once at them. So they symbolize the where the characters are in the story at that point. Later on, when it turns to nighttime, you get a completely blue wash palette and you're in the swampland, right? That's a whole different thing. You're literally stuck in the mud at night, right? Like, so you Mad Max does it really overtly, right? Super highly stylized. This movie doesn't do it at all, except for some, what I found to be very, very strange coloring choices. They desaturated the images in certain areas almost to black and white. Now, sometimes that was because they were shooting at night and trying to show or get the vibe of night, and so they just completely desaturate the image. But then in other shots during the day, it's desaturated except for the yellows and greens. And they stick out way too much, and it felt very strange, and I kind of kept thinking, like, what's the purpose of that? Like, what are we trying to say visually by making that choice? I don't know the answer, but it's not it's not consistent, and B, it doesn't seem to speak to anything thematically or story-wise every time it's happening. And the inconsistency of that really takes you out. So when you don't move from one environment to the next, or like one environment, I guess, scene to scene and have that be representative or symbolic of something. And also you have inconsistency with the color palette. It just becomes muddy and confusing. And that's a lot of that middle section of the movie that I felt where I just was sort of like, I feel like we're just kind of walking in circles.
Yeah, ditto. I mean, a way... Like, I mean, a way to look at that is that the color, those coloring choices, they should just be a small aspect of something greater with how it's shot. Like I can see them talking about afterwards, oh yeah, doing this, deciding just these colors, do this because it will reinforce this, and there's this progression going on. But unless you are also doing that with the sort of the bigger tools of where are you placing the camera? Are you moving it? Are you not? What are your lenses? Blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of too much like an afterthought, it feels like, those color choices.
I continuously felt as though they had to frame out things. And what I mean by that is like, you get to certain parts of the story where you would think you'd want to back away and sort of show the scope of the place that they've arrived at. One being there's that moment when they get to kind of a little canyon that Bruder has to like walk through first, and then he throws a rock back out to say that it's fine. That we never get an establishing sense of where we actually are. We're really close in there with them. And I think that maybe it was just a product of where they were shooting, that they were limited and had to shoot it that way, right? Because like 2 feet over was a telephone pole or something.
Yeah, they're in Malibu.
Exactly. And so, it felt to me like the limitations of where they were shooting was showing. And then the result was this kind of ambiguous style that doesn't really speak to anything. And it hurts because it's distracting.
I agree. There's an ambiguous or just kind of non-style almost. But I don't think a limited location is necessarily an excuse for that.
I mean, don't either.
And that's aside from like, that's even... You could have just gotten, the second unit B-roll of actually in Montana or whatever. But still, even without that, just something about like feeling, I wanted to feel even more drawn into the characters. And like something, I don't know, maybe I like how I think of it and approach it is at any time, how objective and subjective are you feeling with the characters? And it's a dance, a lot of the times, or it can be really one or the other. And just, I don't know, whatever that balance was, maybe it was the thing that wasn't clicking. I don't know, it kind of going on here, but I'm just really interested in, because it's like, and how it was definitely in something how it was shot, but still just like, what was it missing?
Yeah. There are some really pretty shots.
Yeah.
But they're very few and far between.
And I will say I didn't ever feel like someone was going to pull out a cell phone or we were going to see a telephone pole. Like I did think it was
Sure.
I felt in the world. It was cool.
Yeah. It just felt constrained, and maybe that was a choice, but it felt very constrained to me for some reason. Like I never felt like I really knew where I was.
Maybe it was too like, it was lacking like it was all there. Again, the story, the performances ramping up attention, but not in like how it was shot. I wasn't ever feeling like the stakes were rising and how it was shot. But then I could say that's okay. Like what they were going for was just, a quote unquote like realism. Mm-hmm. We are just kind of watching things play out. But even then, like I was watching, this is so not these movies, so maybe it's a bad example, but I caught up on like the 2 main Safdie brothers movies, Uncut Gems and Good Time. They're both great. I really loved them. But like thinking that what those movies are such a good reminder for me, as like I always think and like that that style that I'll call, realistic. I'm buying into the realism, whether it's grainy, it's shaky, like all that's working for it. But then I see in those 2 movies, there's still all these deliberate choices and executions of color and like doing really specific things with framing and motion. That's sort of like the best of both worlds, where I feel like this is the real world I'm stepping into. Yet there's still all these cinematic things going on, and that you can hold both in tandem. Which this one was just kind of like, again, just kind of meh.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't think that the camera is used in this movie as a way to tell the story. And that's sort of a weird thing to say. Like, what do I mean by that? But I think you can get a lot out of choices you make with camera moves, specifically to support story elements or the state of mind of characters. And I never felt like the camera was connected to the characters or the story.
That's, I think, Tim, what all this was adding up to and why we kept talking around it. That's, I think, the most spot on, succinct way you can put it.
Which is, a choice. But I think that if that choice was made specifically, it ended up not working to the benefit of the film.
And because of all that, just last but not least, yeah, maybe it was a little long. Great. That's all I have for what did not work.
It's like 2 hours, 12 minutes or something like that?
15, 10, yeah, something like that. I think 2 hours, 15.
That's too much. It's just too much. Come on, guys.
Like a big epic Western. It's cool. Like, you can do that, but this just wasn't quite reaching those heights to
not
justify
enough.
it.
Look, there's not enough story content to justify more than maybe 100 minutes in my mind. Just isn't. And also, where are we getting those added minutes, right? It's certainly not from B-roll. It's not from establishing where we are in the visual landscape, which in a Western, man, that's your bread and butter. Show us them vistas, baby.
Right. I know. Well, I will say though, it was cool. Even though I will say it was a little long, it didn't feel super, super draggy. It was just, it's more for me, like, good. If it was shorter, it would be better.
Yeah.
But it didn't necessarily, I didn't get super bored in it.
Yeah.
So
all right. Well,
whatever that's worth.
Cool, dude.
Great. A cool dude means Tim is ready for our next and last section. Here we go. Things of note.
This should be interesting.
I always like to tell people where this was shot. Like I said, it was in the Malibu sort of creek, Malibu. They shot MASH over there and all sorts of stuff, but also shot on the Paramount Ranch, which is kind of it's on the other side of those mountains. Somewhere that a lot of Westerns, that Western set was there for many, many years and burnt down a few years ago.
Yeah, there was like a bunch of sets within that area or like sort of sections or areas. So one of the main ones was the one where like the first 2 seasons of Westworld were shot. That got burned down.
Mm-hmm. I think at this point they've rebuilt the majority of it, but yeah. It's a cool area and lots of very well-known things have been shot there. It's pretty famous.
I want to explore some more of these surrounding LA areas where all these old movies and Westerns were shot. Yeah.
When we were looking for locations for our short film last year, we got in touch with a lot of these places and they just were outside of our budget and they were so overbooked, right? Like, there's like a 2-year waiting period at Paramount Ranch for any open slots. And it's just like, well, how could you ever schedule that? It's crazy. And then it burned down, so that changed the whole scope of it anyway.
It makes you think, like, is it just Westworld? Like, what? How are you planning this?
Really?
What
else?
Here's a little thought I had. I was never sure, still not sure, if I like the title. I didn't like it going in. I liked it more when it ended. Like, I felt the bone tomahawk, like the power of the weapon and seeing their bone tomahawks. But something about it just didn't capture the vibe, so to speak, at the end. I don't know. I keep going back and forth. That's why it's a thing of note. I'm just not sure if I like the title.
That's interesting. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's okay.
My favorite little thing of note I got out of this film could have put in what worked, but didn't seem too appropriate. But it was when I think it's Chicory is explaining something he saw or whatever at the beginning while he was out on a ramble.
Yeah, man.
And I fell in love with that word exists.
Yep.
It's Tim, like it's the perfect word for like what I love to do here in Hollywood. Not so much in these days with everything closed down, but like the 10 years I've lived here, I've always loved to like pick a direction, Los Fleas or Hollywood. I live right between the two, and go on a ramble. And what is the ramble? So definition, noun, ramble. A leisurely excursion for pleasure, especially an aimless walk.
Amazing.
And then to ramble, to move aimlessly from place to place, to explore idly. And that's what I just like. See what you get into. Walk around.
The title of one of the great Led Zeppelin songs of all time, Ramble On. Yep.
Ding it down. Yeah, and it's I'm like, hey, maybe this friend's around. Maybe I'll just wander into this old place I've been to a million times. Maybe I'll wander to this new place I never tried before. Maybe I'll go to check out this place that just opened. Maybe there's a movie premiere going on I can scope out. I'll pick this direction. Oh, there's a park I never found. Oh, it's run into someone going for a ramble. Let me go. Let me go on my ramble about my ramble. God, I got to use that word now. It's great. We don't have like going for a walk doesn't capture it because that's too much like you have a clear destination or, maybe it's just for exercise. No, man.
I think, the language of the late 19th century was pretty interesting. There are definitely terms that we got to bring back. I can't think of any, like ramble's a great example of one, but they had a way of, I think trying to, describe things in a more fancy way. Just go watch Deadwood for like 5 minutes. It's completely wall to wall of those weird expressions and idioms and stuff like that. It's great.
Great. Did you have anything other or any other things of note?
Not really. I mean, I remember when this came out and it got there was a lot of buzz around it. It was nominated for a lot of stuff in the sort of indie film circuit, the festival circuit. And that's great. Good times. I don't really I wanted to look and see what else has this director done since this.
There was like a couple like Mel Gibson, Vince Vaughn movies.
What? Yeah, Brawl in Cell Block 99 and Dragged Across Concrete. Now I've never heard of either of those, so interesting. Yeah. Weird. Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson. Interesting pair. Anyway, cool.
They pair well based on how they are outside of their movies, I think.
Yeah.
Great, Tim. Well, if that's it for Bone Tomahawk, we got our recommendations for this week.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Honestly, having just mentioned it, I'm going to recommend Deadwood, the series. Cool. I haven't seen the movie. Did you see the movie?
No, I've only seen like a couple episodes of the show. I liked it, but just for whatever reason didn't follow through.
I have not finished it. I think I'm like I forget how many seasons there are. I'm about 2 seasons in, I think. It's really good. I need to get back on track. But man, just Westerns, dude. I love Westerns. And Deadwood is like, in the last 30 years, probably the best Western that I think has really been out there.
Cool.
The Best
Yeah,
Western. I stayed in a Best Western a couple months ago.
Which has nothing to do with Westerns. Like, the words Best Western. Yes.
Yep.
Hey, Will, when does this episode release? Let's see. Well, no, I'll save that one for later. I'm just going in order of how I've watched things. Well, now I can finally recommend Dead, something that I've been recommend Dead since it came out in 2009. But after watching Climax, I finally wanted to watch another Gaspar Noé movie that had been on my watch list for a long time, and I was embarrassed to say I hadn't seen. But I finally watched Enter the Void.
Oh yeah, what'd you
watched it? I thought it was great. I'm recommending it.
Hell
of course. I loved it. Was Tokyo. It was like Tokyo psychedelics, out of body stuff. It's all very much my bag, baby.
Yeah. Cool. That's fun. I should revisit it. I only saw it once, maybe, I don't even remember. A while ago.
Anyway, yeah, I finally saw it, guys. So, hey, if you've been recommending it to me, there you go. And I'll just recommend Dead it right back to you.
Cool.
Gaspar Noé, keep it up. I'm excited to see what else you've got.
Yeah. All
right, Tim, your
ready?
turn to pull from the hat. Yeah.
My turn. Here we go. I'm going to pull this one right here. Oh, going way back in time to 1932. Vampire. Or vampire.
Oh, yeah. Vampire. There's supposed to be a good Criterion release of this.
Sweet.
Maybe
Yeah,
we'll
I'm
see
sure.
if our favorite video rental place has it.
Hell yeah. We'll get some Haxan vibes.
Yeah. I have not. I have not seen this. You have not seen it. I've of course seen Nosferatu like a bunch, but cool. I'm excited to see what this one's all about.
Yeah, it should be fun. I've been wanting to watch this. I right before we started doing the podcast, I was like about to watch it, and then it got put on the list, and I was like, oh, all right, got to hold off.
Great. Carl Theodor Dreyer. Yeah, we know that name. It's the director.
Yep.
All right, great. Look forward to that. I always get excited for the pre-2000 ones, and these old ones that we haven't seen. It feels like big check marks to check off.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, until next week for Vampire, you could find us at dismemberinghorror.com, wherever you found us, at our Instagram, Twitter, all those good things.
It's true.
Is that all you got to say about that, Tim?
Yeah.
Just want to wish everyone well. A happy December.
Thanks for listening. You guys are great. You're so great.
Made it to the end of 2020 here. Indeed. Well, everyone, as we just said, we do mean it. Thank you so much for listening. Go and have yourself a ramble.
Yeah, have a ramble, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.